3, 2, 1.
Welcome to today's episode of the Politipop Podcast, the podcast where we take your favorite pop culture media and discuss the social and political themes within. I am your host, Mike Booch, and I have with me today my good friend and returning co-host, Tyler. How you doing, Ty?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing okay. How are you?
As okay as can be expected. That's right. Ty was with me on our last episode, which was a deep dive into the movie Parasite. And we're returning for our second in this class commentary trilogy. Now, Ty, before we begin, I have three questions. I want to get inside the mind of the one and only Tyler. So, my first question for you is, what is the last movie you watched?
Oh, this can get a little scary. It's called Tiger Tail. I watched it yesterday.
Any relation to Tiger King?
No, not at all. But it is on Netflix. It is on
I don't even
Netflix. It's a Netflix exclusive, so there you go.
What's it about?
It's about someone from Taiwan who winds up immigrating to America to live his dream life and winds up not living the life he thought he would, being trapped in a loveless marriage and living with the consequences of his actions.
Well, god damn. All right. And that's Tiger Tail.
Tiger Tail, yeah.
Tiger Tail. Awesome. What is the last video game you played?
The last video game I played was Final Fantasy VII Remake.
You know, I had a feeling I knew the answer, but I felt like asking anyway. How does it hold up to the original?
It's awesome, man. I mean, it's very, very different. The gameplay is totally different, not turn-based anymore. The graphics are incredible.
What? It's not turn-based?
Yeah, it's not turn-based. There's like a classic battle mode, but it's very like action-oriented. You can switch between characters and do different attacks. They've really updated it for the modern gaming generation, but I mean, if you played the original, as soon as you see that first song hit in the opening credits, you'll hit the nostalgia, man.
Oh, I can't wait. All right. And what was the last song or music you listened to?
Oh, man. I think it was Bad Moon Rising.
Oh, by Creedence Clearwater Revival?
Yeah, I listen to, when I'm really depressed, I listen to a lot of Halloween music on Pandora, and that's one of my favorites on there, and I think that was one of the last ones that came on that I remembered clearly singing to myself in the car.
That's pretty good. I like that. All right, cool. So now that we got deep into your psyche, we're going to get deep into this movie, The Platform. Parasite was not super subtle in its discussions of class issues and class warfare. This one takes things and makes it a little more extreme and kind of hits you upside the head with it. Do you want to give him the plot?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll just say, Parasite had some deep messages. It could be a dark film, but this movie takes it to like the next level.
Pun intended? I'll take it.
Nice. So basically the plot of The Platform is there's a place called The Hole where they're not too clear on it. I don't know if it could be prisoners or people can voluntarily go in exchange for like a diploma or some sort of, I guess, other thing they can get. And basically two people on each level live together, right, for 30 days, for a full month. And a platform of food goes down from the first level all the way down, and the people can eat as much as they want in 2 minutes. And whatever's left as it gets to the next level, that person eats it.
Now, at the beginning of the movie, we don't know how many levels there are to the hole, or I put the pit in my notes. I'm not sure. Might have been the version I watched compared to you.
It's definitely the hole, according to IMDb.
Oh, that's why. Okay, so I watched the subbed version. No, not the subbed. I watched the dubbed version.
So did I, actually.
Oh, okay, because in the dubbed, I know they called it the pit.
Yeah, I think that was like when you click on it on Netflix, it starts with the dub. You have to change it if you want to watch the sub version.
All right, so let's get right to it. At the beginning of this movie, we have a young man named Goreng. That's it?
Goreng,
correct?
Yeah, I believe that's how you pronounce it.
Goreng, and he wakes up in this, for lack of a better word, cell with this older man. And what's his name again?
His name is Trimagasi.
Trimagasi, that's right. So So we see him wake up in this room with this older man named Trimagasi, and they are roommates or cellmates, however you want to put it. And they are on what level? It was in the 40s, right?
I think it was 45 or 48.
Okay, so they're in this level in the mid 40s, and we find out basically how the pit, or we find out how the hole works. They're put in this compound in this program with no access to anything on the outside. Like, they're not allowed to bring their phones or anything. They only get one object to bring inside with them, right?
Yeah, that's true. But I don't know. Is it not a prison? Because they do reveal that people are put there as a punishment.
Yeah, it's a little gray that way, I think. Like, you can go there voluntarily, or sometimes you are put there as a punishment.
Yeah, it seems though no one really understands what they're getting themselves into. Because Goring, he voluntarily comes here, but he has no idea what he's in for.
Maybe the whole thing is a commentary on the appropriation of certain cultures and realizing that what might be something you just do for recreation might be hell for somebody else.
That's interesting.
For example, people going camping, right? They live outside for the fun of it. Homeless people live outside because they have to.
Yeah, that's valid.
All right, let's say that's what it is. And they each get an object to bring in, but other than that, they don't have any access to anything. The main character, Goring, he brings a copy of Don Quixote because he wants to catch up on reading while he's there.
He thinks it's a great opportunity. I think he's also trying to quit smoking, so he feels like it's a cool place to be isolated, read his book. He's going to get a degree, right? They promise him a diploma. So for him, it's like a no-brainer.
It's a win-win-win, according to him.
And it's only 6 months, that's huge, right? 6 months, he gets a diploma, gets to quit smoking and read his book.
And some people are in there for much longer than that. And in this room, there is a huge hole in the center. And through this hole is where the platform comes down. And the platform starts on level 0, where they make all of this amazing food. They have these incredible chefs who are held to these high standards to create delicious, delectable meals. And in each level, people are allowed to eat whatever they want. And as it goes down, clearly the platform doesn't have as much food. And the whole idea is that not everybody gets what they need because the people up top eat too much, and so the people down below never have a chance to get the food they need.
Yeah, it's not very subtle in its message, but it's definitely interesting. Yeah, the first time the platform arrives, and Goring's he's so disgusted by it. He's like, oh, they've been picking at it, like this is leftovers. I don't want to eat this. And Trimagasi's like, well, you better eat it because you're not getting any more food till tomorrow.
Yeah, and the interesting thing also is that they have a month to be in this cell, and then they get knocked out by some sleeping gas, and the next month they wake up in a completely different level, and they don't know what level they're going to be on.
Yeah, I think that's honestly the best part of this film. I think that really pushes the plot, obviously, and the messages really, really well because, you may be on floor 5 for 1 month, and then you don't know what floor. You could be on floor 75 the next month, so you really have no idea where you're going to wind up.
All right, so let's pretty much take this thing from the beginning to the end. One interesting thing I found out about this is that it seems like no matter where people are, there's always somebody above them and somebody below them. Yeah,
but you're not supposed to interact with them, right? Like, I think Goring tries to talk to them, and Trimagasi tells him, no, don't talk to them. The people above you aren't going to talk to you. Don't you talk to the people below you.
Exactly. And just because the people above aren't going to treat you well means you shouldn't treat the people below you any better.
Yeah, it's this horrible cycle that seems to just repeat and repeat and repeat where everyone is just cruel to the person below them.
And what I also found interesting was that it seems like no matter where you are, unless you're at the absolute bottom or the absolute top, you kind of feel like you're middle class because somebody always has it better than you and somebody is always going to have it a little worse than you. So it makes, no matter where you are, you could be one level above the lowest one, but you'll still be like, oh, well, I have it better than that person. I'm middle class.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really interesting that at any time these people could just work together and help themselves out. And they never do. They always work against their own self-interest.
Yeah, and it seems interesting that only one guy chose to bring a rope with him as his object.
Yeah. I think they mentioned most people pick weapons, right? A crossbow, a knife, a bat, whatever it is. Like most people choose weapons. So, I don't know. I don't know how much knowledge these characters are supposed to have of the situation, but most people go in there thinking, all right, like, I'm going to hurt somebody, I guess, while I'm in here.
Yeah, clearly Goreng didn't know what he was getting into because he brought a book. He didn't bring a weapon. He thought it was going to be basically like a vacation, like a rehab or something.
Yeah, and everyone, I think, is constantly judging him for that. They're like, you brought a book. Like, what were you thinking? You could have picked anything. You picked a book to bring with you? Are you crazy?
So we have Trimagasi. You already mentioned how he'll literally pee on the people in the floor below him. He also spits on the platform after it leaves his level. And Goreng's like, why are you doing that? And he's like, oh, because the people above definitely spit on our food. And he's like, what if next month those people are above us? He's like, then they'll spit on us too. They'll piss on us too. The bastards. And yeah, you mentioned it before. It's just a cycle that's going to keep repeating.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that Goreng sees this right away. He's like, well, it doesn't make sense to abuse the people below us. We don't know where they're going to be. They could be the ones right above us. If we treat them right, maybe they'll treat us right. But to everyone else, his roommate Trimagasi included, it's like, no, this is what they do. Everyone above you is always going to be a bastard. And so we have to be a bastard to the people below.
And that kind of brings me back to the cookie story from last week, where I mentioned that woman was like, oh, well, I had to work super hard in order to go through college. These next people shouldn't have it easier than I have it because I had it so bad.
Yeah, exactly. It's that constant, instead of working with the people who are almost in the same, situation as you or even slightly below you, you're always blaming them, for your problems and taking it out on them when it could easily be remedied by just, helping each other out.
Now, it seems like nobody really has a problem with this system, or at least the first person to have a problem is Goreng, right? He brings up how ridiculous this whole idea is, but the system's so bad, but people just want to keep it the same because they have a chance to be on that higher level.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, that idea that you're going to be able to pick whatever food you want, and like, I think it's important to note the food's not just like junk food. It is extravagant cuisine. Like top chefs are working for this and they're making the food. And when they interview you, they ask you what your favorite food is. So it's going to be put into the menu. So like this food is going to be really, really good. And so the people at the top, they gorge themselves on it.
Yeah. And it seems like, to me at least, that this whole thing is a view of capitalism, that you have the chance to one day be up top. So people are like, all right, well, as long as that chance is there, I'll take it. Even though next month I could be on level 200 and not get any food, but I could also be on like level 20 and have my pick of it.
Yeah, exactly. And, they don't explicitly say this in there either, but it appears like they're being watched because if you keep some food from the platform, they try to kill you, right? They either like put freezing cold temperature on your level or super hot. I think Goreng keeps like an apple or something to himself, and Trimagasi's like, if you don't throw it away, we're gonna die. So that's like the only interaction they ever have, is the platform. And if you keep the food, and nobody never talks to them, reacts to them, nothing. Like it's like there's always somebody watching though, and I always thought that was kind of an interesting concept.
And that totally made me think about the idea of being able to save money. Because in saving food, Goreng's like, all right, I might not be hungry now. I'll save up some food and, I'll be good for later. Or maybe, if it's the end of the month and you save some food, you'll be good to go to whatever next level you end up on. But no, they make it literally impossible for you to save. It's like you die or you just take whatever you can at the moment. Saving is not an option for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as I was watching, I wondered, is it random the floor they put you on the next month, or are they judging your actions? Because Goreng tries to be pretty kind. He kind of forms a good relationship with Trimagasi, and he tries not to give in to the stereotypes of how people act there. And they seem to get punished, right? They get put to like a much lower floor. So I wonder, was that random, or were they constantly testing people?
Oh, that's such a good idea. I never thought of that actually.
Yeah, because every time he like gave in, to a little bit to the system, they gave him a better floor the next month.
Wow. That's something else. And as long as you end up being on a better floor, you don't care where anybody else is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the only character that really seems to care is that woman, right? Was it an immigrant woman, right, who rides the platform down the center?
Did they mention that she was an immigrant in the movie?
Yeah, because Trimagasi... you find out the reason he's in there is because he was obsessed with products, right? New products. He was always watching like commercials on TV for new products, like one of those like home shopping networks.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
he,
like a QVC style. Or
yeah,
whatever it
exactly,
was.
right? So he buys this, I think it was like a knife sharpener. It's supposed to sharpen like any knife, right? Like it can sharpen any knife, any kind of knife at all. It'll never dull if you use this sharpener. And then the next day they release a knife that never dulls. And he's like, "Oh, those bastards! They got me, and they got me to buy this. It's unbelievable." And he was so angry that he's blaming the people on the commercial, not himself. He throws his TV outside, and what happens? It falls on an immigrant, and he kills the immigrant. And what does he say? He's like, "Well, he should have never been there in the first place. He was, he's a filthy immigrant. He shouldn't have been there." And they tie that back in later with that girl riding the platform.
Oh, and there you go. And we find out what she does a little bit later on.
Yeah.
But just a little bit on that anti-immigrant sentiment is, it's so funny how this is a Spanish film, but they were able to get that same sentiment that we have here in America. Because you hear about the children that are being kept in cages at the border and them and other immigrants who come here dying from the flu or whatever else. Now it's probably COVID. But like if you talk to somebody who is totally anti-immigrant, they'll be like, "Well, they knew the risks when they came here. They shouldn't have come here in the first place if they were sick. So if they die, they die. Like as long as they're not an American citizen, even if they're a child, it doesn't matter."
Yeah, absolutely. They blame them. It's their fault. They shouldn't have been here. They shouldn't have tried to come here.
So yeah, he does share that same sentiment, which I found very surprising. Because like I said, maybe it's not just an American sentiment.
I mean, it definitely isn't. I mean, I think that almost every country in the world you find this, no matter where you are. If anyone's different than the majority, they judge you. It just depends on where you are and what kind of person they're judging.
Now, one thing I noticed about Goring is that he's one of the few people who are a part of this system that actually have a problem with it. And it seems like the majority of people, no matter how victimized they are by it, they still say, "Oh, well, this is the default. It's better than nothing."
Yeah, I mean, you find out like Trimagasi, for example, has been here for quite some time. He's running towards the end of his sentence. I think he's in the last 2 or 3 months. And it does make you wonder, were other people like this in the beginning? Or are they just so broken down by the system around them that they just give into it? They just begin to accept it.
And that was such a mirror of where our world is right now, our country specifically, is that we're seeing the pitfalls of capitalism over and over and over again. Originally it was, oh, well, people would save more money if they didn't go out to eat, and now people aren't going out to eat and the economy is imploding. And people are losing their minds. It's so interesting to see that, but people are holding on so tightly to a capitalist ideology.
Yeah, I mean, people are literally fucking dying, and people don't seem to really, they don't care. They don't want to change the system. They don't think it needs to be changed. They want to earn their money, so to speak, right? That's a big thing. I want to earn my money.
And there was an NPR article that had a poll on it talking about how popular Bernie Sanders was getting. This was back in February, how popular he was getting, yet socialism still didn't have great ratings with most Americans.
Yeah, well, it is interesting because they've done polls, though, too, asking people, like, for example, about healthcare for all, right? It actually is popular. Like, the majority of people that they interviewed and asked about this wanted it for all. But they felt that Bernie Sanders wasn't an electable candidate. That's where the problem came in. Like, it's not even so much about the policy of socialism. It's about, this idea of they've made it so it's like, Trump versus whoever the Democratic candidate is. And I think people aren't even paying attention to the policies. As long as it's someone that isn't a Republican, isn't Trump, they're going to go for them.
Yeah, that really does seem to be the way. Just want to bring up another bit about socialism while we're on it. People like their system because it's better than the unknown, right? But we do find out that there are socialist countries and they are very well known. You can find our show notes and sources on our WordPress site after the podcast. But I did find a really interesting article about successful socialist countries. It said that Bolivia has drastically cut extreme poverty and has the highest GDP growth rate in South America. And there are other countries that have adopted and enacted socialist ideas and policies, and they've seen success, like Norway, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Great Britain, Canada, the Netherlands, Spain being one of them also, and a few others. So I really wonder why there are so many people who are vehemently against it.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to. I think people don't understand socialism. I think that's where the core of this comes from. A lot of people think that it is the same as communism, and they don't really understand communism either.
Very true.
Yeah, and I think that's where it comes from. People don't understand the core concepts of it. And I think socialism comes down to it's not taking away wealth from people. It's just making things a little more equal and giving the people ownership over things a little bit, rather than having all like these private sectors controlling everything. The people, own it a little bit more. And I think that most people don't understand that. They don't get it. They hear socialism, they go right to communism. They think, Russia back in the day, North Korea, China, it has a stigma, but those are all abominations. They're all not accurate versions of what communism was even supposed to be. And socialism is not the same.
Yeah, and that was something I saw when I watched a video recently. They were talking about the difference between socialism and communism, and they said that there actually haven't been any true communist countries.
Yes, I agree with that. Absolutely. There has not been a true communist country.
Yeah, and a big part of it was just that, the government was still controlling everything, and within that government are corrupt people, and that was the problem. And of course, we also see that there are some socialist countries. The biggest one, right, is Venezuela. Everybody brings up Venezuela. Oh, well, look what happened in Venezuela. Look what happened in this country. Look what happened in that country. Well, completely discounting the fact that the U.S. has interfered in so many foreign elections and in so many other countries' economies that it makes it impossible to have a successful socialist country there.
Agree. History is written by the winners, right? So America's writing what happened to Venezuela. They're the ones deciding what you hear. They don't mention, how they've damaged them so much and how they've made it almost impossible for them to recover, economically with the sanctions they've put on the country. I mean, it's brutal.
It really is. Back to Goring real quick. We noticed that he goes in 6 months voluntarily just so he could get a degree. His cellmate, Trimagasi, he actually seems pretty upset by that because he's like, oh, well, I've been here for almost a year and I'm not getting a degree.
Yeah, absolutely. He's very angry. But you find out Trimagasi's not there really of his own. I mean, he is of his own free will.
Yeah, I guess. You're right.
He was given an option, right? I think it was an insane asylum or here after he threw the TV out the window. And he chose here. But it is a punishment. He's not here to earn a degree. He's here to be punished for murder.
And in a way, it seems like Goring is also being punished because 6 months versus 4 years, right? Like he's trying to take the easy way out, and he's definitely getting punished for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could almost consider it like student loan debt. You know what I mean? Like he can't escape it. He thinks it's going to be easy. He thinks it's going to be fine. He's going to have his degree and move on. But that thing's always hanging over him. That debt that he has to pay, and that's living in this prison almost and surviving.
And that's really what I think it is in real life, right? It seems like we are getting punished for pursuing higher education because you do hear there are a lot of boomers who are like, well, if you couldn't afford it, you shouldn't have went to college. But what kind of a job can I get if I don't go to college? Oh, well, you can get a trade job. You can go to trade school, which is much cheaper. But right now there are so many, unions that are being undercut and have to fight in order to get work. It's just a lose-lose situation.
And I feel like growing up, people, they hammered into you got to go to college, you got to get a degree, you got to get a real job, That's what they tell you so that when you get there, you feel like you have to. Now you have, a 17-year-old kid having to pick what they want to do with the rest of their life. I mean,
how many great decisions did you make at 17,
Not too many. And now, it's like, all right, you're going to choose to go $50,000 in debt or more to get a degree. I mean, that's kind of insane for someone that age to have to make that decision.
The financial aid advisor who helped me out when I went for my first year of college literally told me as I signed off on my loans, she said, you just signed away the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And I laughed. I was like, ha ha ha. I mean, kind of a fucked up thing to say, but like,
But being
it's
real, I guess, you know?
but it is true. It really is. And being on the other side of it, because I used to work in higher education, my job was to convince a bunch of high school kids to put themselves in debt. But it was like the better version of it because it was going to our school instead of going to another school that would charge you more.
It's like
That was
army
basically
recruiting.
it.
You
Yeah.
know, it's almost
Oh,
like, you know, hey,
absolutely.
look, you know, this is going to set you up for the rest of your life. Come on, you know, join us. It's great. Let's tell you all the perks. But they don't tell you the bad parts, right? I don't think you sit down with people and like, listen, you're going to get this education. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a job in your field. Doesn't necessarily mean you're ever going to be able to pay off these loans. You know, you don't break that down for them. That's the stuff they don't want to talk about.
And another thing that they don't want to talk about in this movie is Goreng's idea. He can't be the first to have it, but he is going to spend this whole movie trying to enact it, that food should be rationed so that way everybody gets to have some. And Trimagasi calls him a communist for just believing in basic human rights, which is also the trend, right?
And I think you see this constantly throughout the film, you know, not to jump ahead too much, but he gets another roommate later on who wants to instill this in people, right? She wants to make everyone ration and do the right thing. And she worked for the people who would put you here. She was the one who interviewed Goreng, but she didn't even understand. She didn't understand like the ramifications, I think, of what she was doing sending these people here. So much like, you know, you as a recruiter, she was recruiting people here.
Yep, absolutely. And, you know, while I did have to go through higher education before I worked there and got other people to do it, I don't know what those kids' lives are like now.
Yeah, I mean, you have no idea where they are, what they're doing.
Now, do you think that the older generation is a bit afraid of the next generation?
I think they know better. They know better than the generation before them. You know, we've lived through it. We've lived through all this stuff. We know you're young, you're naive. You know, you don't know what's best for you. Right? That's what I've heard a lot with, you know, for example, like voting for Bernie Sanders. You know, a lot of older Democrats are saying, no, that's not what you want. You know, I'm protecting you by not voting for him. You know, I'm going to give you Joe Biden. He's what you really need. You know, they think that he's what we're looking for. He's not going to fundamentally change anything. You know, he's going to keep things the same. But I think there comes a point where, and this happens, I think, in every generation, where the youth they need something more. And we're at a point now where the world is collapsing around us. You know, the youth is tired of just accepting the bare minimum.
That's what Bob Dylan says in his song, right? The times they are changing.
Yep.
He does say that to older generations. He goes, don't criticize what you can't understand. You better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone. The times they are changing. Like, you better start moving along with things. And if you don't, then you're getting left behind. That's basically it. And that's honestly what it's always been with history, right? Like, our parents, the generation before them, were like, whoa, you guys are too radical, blah, blah, blah. And the generation before them, same thing. And it just seems to be the natural course of things.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard, you know, you're a Democrat when you're young, you're a Republican when you're old, you know, because almost like then you really get to see the world. You understand that those radical changes aren't possible and aren't needed. But I mean, I don't buy into that. I don't believe that. I think that's just what the government, what people want you to believe, and so many people follow that trend that they just keep falling into it.
I think it's definitely more of a class thing too, right? If I end up being an older person but I have money, yeah, I might be more inclined to vote Republican. Not, you know, in a very hypothetical sense, but you know, I think that's why people they want to protect what they have.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you struggled your entire life and you have managed to save some money and get a nice, you know, and live a pretty decent life by the time you're, I don't know, 60, 65, you know, maybe it's not in your own self-interest anymore to vote for a more liberal or leftist, you know, candidate. Maybe, you know, you're aligned with that Republican or conservative person more. And like, I get that. That's what is best for you now. But people forget, you know, where they came from and why they had a struggle to get there, and think, well, what about my kids and their kids? Or why do we have to make it a struggle for them too?
Yeah, and this whole sentiment really comes through when Trimagasi is, you know, we mentioned it before, he's pissing and spitting on the lower levels, and he's like, well, if they end up on top, they'll do the same thing to me, so I might as well do it now. Like, he really does seem to be afraid of losing his power, and when other people get it, what they're going to do. So he's like, I might as well break these people. I might as well do the mean thing before the mean thing gets done to me.
Yeah, absolutely. He doesn't want to break that. So he's almost done, right? He's almost at the end of his time here. Why break the system now? He's already been through it for so long. Just keep it. Let me just ride it out, and then I'll be done. I'll retire, for example.
Yeah.
Get my Social Security. I'm good. There's no reason to rock the boat anymore. I'm at the end of that.
It's not my problem.
Exactly. But Goring's, he's a young man. Obviously, probably an intelligent man. He chooses, what Don Quixote as his book. Not some pulpy story. He wants to read like a really intelligent book, and he wants to get a diploma. So he obviously has, things that he wants to go for in his life.
And this is kind of unrelated, but it brought me back to the Breakfast Club. There's this conversation between... I know, right? Follow me here. There's this conversation between Carl and Vernon. It's the school custodian and the teacher who has the Breakfast Club in detention. And they're having this conversation, and Vernon, don't mess with the bull, get the horns, that teacher, he says, you know what, this generation is going to end up taking care of us when we're older, and that wakes me up at night.
It's a beautiful thing to say. Yeah, it's true.
He's so scared of what might be done once, the younger generation is empowered, basically.
And maybe he shouldn't be scared. I don't, I think there's that sentiment that these younger people don't know what they want, but maybe we are right. Maybe we do know what's right for the world, and they should be happy we're going to take care of them. And by, supporting us, they'll ensure that we're able to help them when they're older.
Now, what did you get from this moment where somebody actually jumps from one of the upper levels and kills themselves?
Yeah, I think Trimagasi says to Goring, some people, they get so bored up in the upper levels, they can't take it. So they wind up jumping. So they have this plethora of food, right? They're not going to starve. They're going to make it through the month. And they still kill themselves. And it's almost like, is that struggle to survive, to fight for your survival, what keeps you going a little bit? I don't know. It was definitely unexpected.
I think in some cases it can be. Like, I don't want to struggle that much, but also, like, when you get to the end of a video game, right? It was a struggle, and it was so great playing the game. But now once you've beaten it, you've gotten all of your achievements. You might have beaten it on hard mode. What else is there? You kind of get that little pain inside of you, right?
Yeah, it's like an emptiness, and I think that's same with people who, how many people wind up retiring and they go back to work? They can't take being home. They're bored. Like, They need something to keep them going.
Or how many people end up being super successful, and now that they do have that money and they don't have the hustle to distract them, that's when all of their problems set in. That's when they're like, oh, well, I never tackled this depression that I have. And you see really successful people end up killing themselves.
Yeah. So, one thing Trimagasi says to Goring is, I don't think you're going to make it up there. Like, I don't think you're going to make it through this. I think he tells me he has too kind of a heart, that he doesn't have what it takes to get through this situation. And, we see that with the immigrant girl that rides down the platform, because she looks injured or like bloody, or, something's happened, and Goring immediately wants to help her.
He wants to rush to her aid.
Yeah, that's his first instinct. I was like, well, somebody's in need. I can help them. Let me help them. Trimagasi's like, no, don't touch her. Don't even go near her. And I think she gets to the next level, and she's attacked by the people down there. And Goring wants to jump down and save her, and Trimagasi's like, go ahead, jump. It's like, 15 feet or something like that. He's like, go ahead, jump down there. See if you can help her. And then he begins to tell the story of her to him.
And what is her story again? That she is trying to find her son or something?
I believe it's her daughter. She's trying to find her daughter, or her child, right? She's trying to find her child. Supposedly she has a child here, and she kills her roommate every month so that the next month she can hopefully be put with her child on the same floor. And Trimagasi says she's a killer. And what do we see? I believe she kills the guys in the level below.
Yep, they attacked her, and then she ends up killing them. And it's kind of like, all right, is that what Goring is going to have to become in order for him to make it through these 6 months?
Yeah, it's a good idea of, hey, maybe, being a nice guy isn't going to work here.
Now, we also see that Goring falls into the pattern of things, just like a lot of us do. It kind of reminds me of the Trump administration, how, like, I was in such shock through all of 2016 and then 2017. And eventually, like, you just kind of fall into complacency. Like, you're like, listen, I'm not going to make any direct changes right now. I'm too busy trying to survive in my life. You just kind of get used to things. And that seems to happen to Goring. He becomes really good friends with Trimagasi. And he, they're both, like, reading Don Quixote to each other. They're both just walking around naked, stretching, doing yoga. It's ridiculous, but it's a little funny, too.
It is. And, I think a lot of this comes from, like, relating to, like, what you said about the Trump administration is people not understanding the system and how it's stacked against us. It's definitely, it's not a fair system, right? So what happens here, Trimagasi and Goring become friends. The month is up and they wake up on the next floor. And what's happened? Trimagasi has now turned on Goring, right? He's tied him up. He says, we're on a lower floor. We're not going to get any food. I'm going to have to eat you. I'm going to have to cannibalize you. This is what you do. And, like, the system takes you, right? As soon as you have, like, camaraderie, they turn you against each other.
And what's wild about this is that Trimagasi believes that he is being merciful to Goring. He says, like, listen, I'm going to tie you up. I'm going to go this many days without eating you. And if food comes down, it comes down. If it doesn't, then I'll start taking pieces off of you. It's going to hurt, but you'll survive. You can even eat some, and then we'll both survive, and that's how we're going to get through this. Like, he has a plan in order to make it through this, and he thinks it's the most logical way, which, I mean, it kind of is if you've been in the hole long enough.
Yeah,
if you have no
it's the
other
only
way,
option.
Yes, this makes sense. We have to eat each other. It's just what we have to do.
And he's not a bad guy. He's like, I'm not going to let you die. I'm going to stop the bleeding. We're going to get through this together. We're going to eat as little of you as we have to make it out. Just accept it. And Goring obviously does not want to be cut up and eaten, so he's trying to fight against it.
And then sure enough, as he's about to get that slice taken off of him, I think he actually does get a slice taken off of him.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is after the platform comes down, 8 days in a row, I think, and there's no food left. And they're on, level 175, I think?
I think they're on 171.
So, yeah, okay, 171. Where if everyone ate a reasonable amount of food, there would be more than enough for them to survive off of. But all it ever is empty plates and glass and empty bottles.
Yes, and we see this, the woman who goes down to every level trying to find her kid. So she ends up saving Goring by coming down just in the nick of time, stabbing Trimagasi a couple of times. But she doesn't kill Trimagasi. She actually frees Goring and gives Goring the knife to take care of this and save himself. And what an image, because to me, that's all about, like, listen, we're at a point at this moment where we can't expect anybody else to save us. Like, we're going to have to unite, because Goring and this immigrant woman have nothing in common except for the fact that they're both suffering together. So maybe they have everything in common, and we're going to have to find our own means to gain our freedom.
It's a horrible situation, but the fact that Goring showed compassion for just a moment to her winds up saving him. That's his moment. Because maybe if he hadn't helped her or tried to help her earlier in the film, I don't know if she would have saved him. But I think she feels like, he showed that compassion. Maybe she wants him to live too. And she kind of tries to help him, be like, listen, this is what you got to do to make it through this.
Well, yeah, they had a bit of a rapport because he treated her like a human being.
Yep, and equal.
Instead of like competition. And in that, she was able to help him later on. That actually reminds me of a Greek mythology trope that they would put in a lot of their stories, was that if you saw somebody who was down on their luck, like a beggar or something, or somebody on the side of the road, if you decided to help them, you usually did it because there's a chance that that person could be a god in disguise who was testing you.
Oh, that's interesting.
And in doing so, like, you would end up passing that test. And it seems like Goring passed this test as well. Somebody was able to come and help him because he just treated them like a person. He recognized them as a person who was stuck in the same terrible conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Goring unfortunately does take the knife and he murders Trimagasi. And I think they wound up eating him, right?
Yep. Because it's been 8 days at this point. So they decide to, feed on him for as long as they have to.
I don't even think he eats him immediately. I think some more time passes, right? Like he doesn't want to eat him, but she winds up giving him a piece and he's so hungry that he just winds up eating it.
Yes, and I think they show him eating the maggots off of Trimagasi's dead body too.
Yep.
Because, they have some nutrition in them, but that's what he ends up eating because he's so hesitant to eat the human. He's so hesitant to do what he has to do to survive. Do you think it's the system's fault or the individual's fault for being driven to this kind of madness out of desperation?
That's a tough one. I think at the end of the day, everyone has to make their own choices, but when the system is so corrupt and they don't give you any kind of options, it's hard not to fall into that. And I think you see that all around the world. Like, how do you feel so overwhelmed? How do you break that cycle? And I get why people just follow it.
Now, it seems like the way to break that cycle in this movie, they kind of make you believe at first that it's going to be knowledge, that the way to do it is you have to educate yourself. And they show that with Goring. His item isn't a knife. It's not a rope. It's not a crossbow. He chooses a book.
Yeah, and he's seeking higher education.
And if he actually ends up on a higher level, it also counts as higher education. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All right. Now, how do you feel about that in real life, though? Do you believe that knowledge is what we need? Do we need weapons? Or do we need both?
I think it depends on the world. Today, weapons wouldn't help us. That's not what we need. We need knowledge because people who vote for Donald Trump, for example, if you interview them, if you see them being talked to, they don't understand the way the world works. Yeah, they just don't even understand the policies. They listen to what they're told. They don't have any kind of critical thinking, and that's so important today to have that kind of thinking, to do actual research, not just listen to a Facebook post or what Fox News or
Fox
CNN
News,
says. Even CNN, they have self-interest. They're not telling you what you should know. It's who's paying them, who's lining their pockets with money. And I think when you have knowledge, when you start to see the world, you and me, for example, I think 2016 was shocking for both of us. But even over the last few years, our eyes have opened to the world a little more. And I don't think it's as surprising. You know what I mean? I won't be shocked if Donald Trump gets reelected. In fact, I expect it. And I think it's so much more than just Donald Trump. It's an issue with the system, with the corruption. And the more you learn about those things, the more you can understand the world and what people need. Because
it does seem like if people are more knowledgeable, the difference they can make is by going to the polls.
Absolutely. And the idea maybe the polls are not fair either. There's voter suppression, things like that. So we need smart people to figure out how to fix the system, and whether it's you're running for some sort of office, or just trying to help in some way. I think the reason I like Bernie Sanders so much is that he wouldn't accept money from super PACs, and he wanted to fix the system. And then you have people who are like AOC, right? Who's young, up and coming. She's on the cusp. It could go either way. But right now she is trying to make a difference. She has a voice. The media likes her. It's people like that can really make or break the system if they refuse to be bought and use the knowledge to educate more people.
And what really blows me away about people that might have lacked that knowledge beforehand is that they voted for Trump, and there are people who voted for him that are seeing what he's been doing in his presidency and are like, oh, well, I can't believe he did this. And that is so surprising to me because to you and I, it seems like we knew exactly who he was going into this.
Yeah, absolutely.
At no point did he hide the absolute subhuman piece of shit that he was. At no point did he hide the fact that he was not qualified in the slightest or how inept he would be. That was never a surprise.
So I'm guessing you didn't vote for him.
That is a solid guess.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, I did not vote for him. At the time, I went for the lesser of two evils and voted for Hillary, which is not something I'll be doing this time either. You know, I banked on the system last time, just like Goring at the beginning of the platform. I believed in the system, and I fell into it and thought it would do the right thing eventually. But, I've ended up, like a lot of people, on the lower levels right now, and, I'm ready to do what Goring decides to do next. He doesn't trust in the powers above. He ends up trusting in himself.
Absolutely. And it comes down to, are you going to keep accepting the system they tell you? Are you just going to follow it? Are you going to vote for the lesser of two evils? Or are you going to send a message that we will not accept any evil, right? Like, why does it have to be the lesser of two evils? Why can't we do better? Like, we can do so much better if you just allow us to. And there's just so much corruption in the world, in our government, that you see this, and this movie is a great reflection of that.
And with this trusting in himself, he decides to think of an idea, concoct a plan. And he gets told after making up this plan that change never happened spontaneously. And that spoke to me on this level because it was like this huge Biden textbook quote. He said it after a debate one night while he was being interviewed and was still able to form some full sentences. And he said, people don't want a revolution. They want some progress, but they don't want a revolution. They just want things to kind of stay the same way they were. And that seems to be the case with what's going on in the platform. And I really cannot stress how ridiculous that mentality is.
It's like, things will never fundamentally change. So if they're broken and people are suffering, why would you not want it to change? We're a country that has the resources to do that, and yet we never seem to utilize them correctly. How can you pay for health care for all? Well, they just magically made a few $1 trillion and pumped it into, businesses, into Wall Street. So we have the resources to do it, and we never do. And I think the same thing could be said about this film. I think it is interesting to note, too, that Goring doesn't, after he has to cannibalize his roommate, when he goes to the next floor, he's kind of broken, right? Like, he's done trying. He just goes into the system and he's doing what he has to. And his new roommate, the woman who interviewed him here, she's the one trying to make change, and she's trying to convince the people below her to portion out the food, because the people above her will not listen. So she's like, maybe I can convince them below me. And she makes a portion of food for them every day and begs them to eat that and make another portion for the people below. And she does this for days and days and days and days, and it never works. And finally, Goring goes over and he goes, listen, if you don't start eating the portions, I'm going to shit all over the food and smear it. And then you'll never get any food. So what do? They listen, right? So they finally start doing this. Everyone starts portion controlling, going down. And, he's like, there you go. I got them to listen. And she says, but you had to convince them. You threatened them.
And it's kind of like, is that what it will take for us? Because at this point, the reason why we ended up here is because nobody wanted anything that was different. Yeah. Because the unknown is so scary, which is what happens in the platform. This is the best system we have. It's also the only system we have, but it's the best system we have. So now we've seen that with the unknown comes very scary things. American lives are being sacrificed due to a virus because we elected a man who doesn't believe in science. Like, there's so many problems that come with, trying to keep things the same. Do you think it was them keeping it the same, or do you think it was the unknown? Like, because what is Trump? He campaigned on trying to be anti-establishment.
At the end of the day, he kind of is in a lot of ways. He doesn't follow the textbook. The difference is,
he
right?
Can't read it.
He's not someone trying to help people. He's trying to further his own interests. You've elected a very rich, selfish man who has been given everything he has and who wants to keep taking. You haven't elected a guy who actually cares about the people that, are dying on the streets. So that's the difference. Like, I understand how he was able to speak to people who feel like they've been forgotten. He doesn't hold himself back. He speaks his mind, and there is some truth to that he's not your typical politician. But at the end of the day, his interests are still not your own. His interests are for billionaires and millionaires, people who are already rich and don't need help. And he'll never change because there's no reason for him to change. He'd only be hurting himself. And I think a lot of the fear of change, is because you're told one thing. You're told that, we can't do it. We can't give healthcare to all, even though they do it in England because we're too big. There's too many states. It won't work here. It won't work here. It's not the same. But people will never give it a try.
And that seems to be what happens in the movie as well, right? They're saying, oh, well, like it won't work on the lower levels because you have so many people who are starving. There's no way they're going to just eat their portions.
Exactly. How do you get everyone to fall in line and follow this and make it work? We can't. It just won't work here. So why even bother? Don't let it change.
And especially when you have people who are on the higher levels who were on the lower levels. They're like, oh, well, I've been through so many bad things on the lower levels. Now is my time to take what I need. Yeah,
that's what they say, right? They're like, oh, I struggled for a month. Now I get to enjoy myself. And they don't put into perspective that if they set the example of not doing that and eating just a little bit, when they go back to a lower level, there may be food for them that time.
Yeah, and it seems like, unfortunately, it does take fear to get them to comply. And we see later on that Goring ends up with a new roommate, and with this new roommate, he takes things to an even more extreme level.
Yeah, I mean, he's pushed, right? Like his roommate, the woman who interviewed him, they're put on an even lower floor, right? And she winds up hanging herself and leaving herself there for him to cannibalize. And then you find out that she has, I think, cancer, right? And she's dying. And I think you see this in the real world too, like John McCain, right? When he was dying, he kind of like fought against what he normally would have been seen to support, right? He fought against Trump and things like that. Because I think at the end of your life, you have nothing left to lose at that point. So maybe you want to go out doing the right thing. So she wanted to try to make a change in the whole. That's why she put herself here. And then Goring is forced to eat her because he has, no other way of surviving. He's on a lower floor. And now he goes to the next floor next month, and he's got this new roommate.
And this guy, he's the one who decided to bring a rope with him. And he's like, listen, we're going to take this rope, and the people above us, they'll help us out, and they'll help us get up, and we'll all be able to go to the top. Like, that's his idea. What a great idea. It's kind of, it reminds me a little bit of trickle-down economics, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Except what gets trickled down on this guy with his short-sighted plan is literal shit. Like the people above, they're like, all right, yeah, we'll take you, we'll bring you up. And then just as he's about to get up there, the woman literally shits on his face and he falls down. He's like, oh, what the hell, blah, blah, blah.
But he almost falls to his death, but Goring actually saves him.
Oh, that's right, back. Goring does save him.
He could have let him fall. And the guy's like, well, we're on floor 5, right? I think it was 5. He's like, well, we're never going to get any closer to the top. Like, this is our one chance, like, we have to get there.
You know what? Maybe it's less about trickle-down economics as being a short... Really, I made the comparison because it's just something that's myopic, and it depends on believing in the people who are above you class-wise. But depending on them to do the right thing, and you find out that they won't, they'll keep all the good stuff for themselves. But really, this kind of reminded me also of Bernie's situation. The last time we recorded our podcast, Bernie was still campaigning. Since then, he has suspended his campaign. He's still in the race. You could still vote for him, but he has suspended his campaign in order to help the people recover from COVID and to help with the fight against COVID-19.
Well, yeah, he's chosen not. He has asked people not to go out and vote. Repeatedly, please do not put your lives in danger. Don't go out and vote for me. He's instead of accepting campaign funds, because he had this huge grassroots campaign, which was unheard of before, where he would not take any money from super PACs, and it was everyday people like you and me giving him money, and he was able to do this really extremely well and really successfully. And he decided to, instead of taking that money for that, he was putting it towards COVID-19 response. So I was someone who donated to him multiple times. He would send me emails saying, please donate to these relief efforts. He would stop talking about the campaign. He didn't care about that anymore. And I think he realized that people were going to die, to vote for him in a system that's already rigged against him. And he chose to, save lives by suspending his campaign efforts.
And much like the guy who had a rope and kind of made it a little further up and was in with the higher level people and believed in them and was like, listen, we can all do this, he got shit in his face. That's what happened to Bernie in 2016, and it's what's been happening throughout this entire race. Even, press coverage has been making it so you don't even know how well he's doing, so people don't believe that he's electable.
Yeah, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, everyone's like, well, he's not electable, so I'm not going to vote for him. I like him, I like his policies, but he's not electable. So if everybody says that, of course he's not electable. It's just like the system that never gets broken. It goes on and on and on. And another thing they said, Bernie would never sink to the level of the people he was going against. He refused to talk bad about Joe Biden. He wouldn't attack him.
Because Biden is the only hope.
Honestly, because Bernie likes the guy. He's worked alongside him in the past. They're all in the government, and he doesn't want to hurt someone in their family. Like, it's just not who he is. He'd rather talk policy, and these people will attack him, tooth and nail,
relentlessly.
Yeah, and that's something that Goring wouldn't do in this film, right? He didn't want to sink into that level. He wanted to talk it out. He wanted to do the right thing, and everybody around him was willing to kill him.
But now we find out how both he and his roommate are radicalized, because the plan becomes, instead of forcing the people directly below you to take a healthy portion, they start riding the platform down and threatening everyone on the level to take a certain amount. And if they don't, they get beaten up, possibly killed, because unfortunately, people need dramatic examples to shake them out of apathy. That's a Batman Begins quote from Ra's al Ghul. Always bring it back to Batman.
Always. Yeah, I mean, they're on this platform, and they're like, the first 50 levels are not starving to death. They've been eating the last couple of days. We're going to ride it down, we're going to keep the food, and we're going to make sure everyone below them gets food. So that's what they do. They ride it down, they stop. If they have to, they will hit them and attack them, but they keep people away from the platform until they get to the levels that need the food the most.
And that kind of harkens to what's going on now with COVID-19, is that people are only staying indoors as much as they are, which some people could be doing a lot better to flatten the curve, but they're only staying indoors because they have to. Like, if they kept every business open, bars, restaurants, parks, and everything, and just told people, stay indoors, they wouldn't do it.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think there's a really cool part in the movie where they get down to a certain level, and Goring's roommate recognizes two of the guys, right? And they had helped him by helping him climb up on another level when he had been there. And he wants to give them food. And Goring's like, no, we can't. Like, we made a promise. It's almost like you can't help your friends. You can't accept that super PAC. Like, you have to follow what we're doing here because it's the right thing. It doesn't matter if you like them or not. Just because, they don't need it. We have to keep doing our plan. And it puts them in a really uncomfortable situation.
Exactly. And so with this plan, they end up finding out from one of the other guys on a lower level. He says that they're not going to succeed in doing what they need to do. They're really just kind of putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole here. Like, are they going to ride the platform down every single day and have to monitor how much people are eating? Because at this point, they're only controlling the people who are being victimized by the system. They're not changing the system at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, their intentions are good. It's going to save people for a day. Absolutely. The people at the lower levels are not going to starve to death. But, even if they did it every day for 30 days, there's going to come a point where they're not on that level 5 anymore. And what if they're on level 175 again? They're not going to. Yeah, they're not going to be able to do it, and no one above them is going to do it. So it'll just keep going back to the way it was.
I want to bring back the cookie analogy from last episode again, too.
It's a great analogy.
Thank you so much. It's not 100% original. I got something like that from Facebook, but
that's fair. Everyone likes cookies. I think we can all agree on it.
Exactly. And this quick question, when you think of cookies, what cookie do you think of?
Chocolate chip.
I think of Oreo. Interesting. I know, right? So, so it seems to be here that you're always closer to becoming someone with less cookies than you are to becoming people with more cookies. They end up having to take the platform down. Since they're not able to get up, they have to keep taking it down, and that's a it's a lot easier, even though they're fighting the whole way.
And I think they get to a point where they meet a friend of Goring's roommate, and he says, it's not enough. This is not what you can do to change it. He's like, you need to send a message.
Yes.
What you need to do is you need to pick an exquisite piece of food, something beautiful, keep it intact, and have it ride all the way back to the top, so that they understand that you were able to stop people from eating that, and that we won't follow their system anymore. And
so that becomes their mission. As they go down, they end up seeing one guy who has a bunch of money. That was his item he brought. He brought like all of his money with him. And it's so funny because that money can't buy him shit, which seems to be the fear of a lot of the 1%, that if they're taxed equally or they end up in a socialist country, that all the money they've earned will mean nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the money they've hoarded will mean nothing.
More accurate. Thank you.
Now, up until this point, Goring believes that there are only 200 levels, that when he was at 171, he didn't even have a chance, couldn't imagine anybody between, 172 and 200 trying to get food. But as they keep going down, they discover just how bad it is. There ends up being 333 levels total.
333 levels. Yeah, he tries to estimate how many levels he thought it was, and he's way off, way off.
And that's the case that, no matter how hard you work, this capitalist system, there is that dream of you possibly rising to the top. But some people, those people on those lower levels, they are never given a chance.
And you don't realize how deep the hole is that you can't dig yourself out of. You give someone like that hope, but is there really any hope for them ever climbing out? I don't think there really is.
No, and the most hopeless individual who ends up being on level 333 is a child.
Yeah, and Goring's roommate, the woman who had hanged herself, had said to him, children are not allowed here, right? They're really, really adamant. The people in charge, there's no children allowed in this area. So she was crazy. That lady's crazy. Her daughter is not here, or son. Not here, like the child is not here. They do not do that. The system, that's one thing they will not do. And it turns out she's wrong. Or lying, but I think she really thought that they wouldn't do that. But there is a child here. So it goes to show, you think that the system in charge here won't do certain things. They have a line they won't cross, but they do. They are willing to cross that line.
And that is a line that we've seen our own system cross multiple times. Even in this example of COVID-19, where there are schools that are closed, some lower income families, people who are at a worse socioeconomic level, some of those children depend on school in order to eat their meals.
Certain people in the government have already said they're willing to sacrifice lives for the economy. That's a line that they will cross.
And they think it's just the old lives, but as we're finding out, it's not. That a lot of people are suffering from this pandemic right now.
Yeah, I mean, you see this all over. The DNC would rather have Donald Trump for 4 more years than let a socialist into power. So they've stacked the cards against, Bernie Sanders. You see this so many times. Just when you think, no, they won't do this to us. They will think of the greater good. They don't. They always choose the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, and people do suffer from these. That's why I find it so aggravating when people are just like, oh, I don't care about politics. I don't want to get involved in politics. How come we can't just let people's political views be their views? And it's because elections have real repercussions. People die. That's the case. We saw Charlottesville happened. A bunch of white supremacists felt emboldened because they were able to sympathize with the ideologies of Donald Trump. And there are people who died, who were killed by Nazis on American soil. And that's just one example.
Yeah, I mean, you could even look at COVID-19. They've said now that people of color, whether it's an immigrant, a black person, native people of America, they have all been affected in a way that a lot of white people are not. And that's because of economic issues, the lack of health care. I've heard that Detroit in particular is in a really bad position right now. People, are trying to stay indoors, but a lot of them can't afford to stay home from work, and they're contracting COVID-19 and dying from it. And this is an issue that's affecting so many people, and yet we don't want to look at that bigger picture. That's not really brought up. They don't really talk about that in the news.
And that's why this whole hashtag alone together thing, while it has a nice sentiment, it's bullshit. Because the way that I'm alone is not the same way other people are
Yeah,
alone.
absolutely. It's different for everyone.
And that seems to happen a lot, that no matter how bad of a situation we're in, it's always a certain group of people who are disproportionately affected, and it's always worse for them.
Always. They never have that opportunity, the same opportunity as other people get.
Now, speaking of opportunity, this little girl who is on floor 333, she doesn't have an opportunity at all. Like, a month goes by without any food, she'll probably die.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
it's amazing to me that she survived this long, but to be put on that last floor, I mean, you got to think anyone past like 120 is dying, right? Because Goring was on 171 or 175, and there was no food left. So how many people are dying, on those floors below that? And I'm also wondering how many people are they putting in here every month? Because are they keeping these floors filled with 2 people every month, and all these people are dying?
Yeah, I mean, after a certain level, it's going to be just a bunch of dead people. Like, they don't really even factor
unless you
in.
eat your roommate, or you just kill yourself, or you die from starvation.
Now, when Goring and Bahar make their way to level 333, they find that there's a child there. Someone that's not ever given a chance, and in this moment their whole plan changes. Goring decides that he's going to take that one piece of delicious food, that awesome looking dessert, that cake, and he's going to feed it to the little girl who's on that level.
Yeah, they've been able to save this one thing, the panna cotta. It's beautiful. It's in like a glass, covering. They've saved it. This is the last floor, right? They're going to be able to send this back up as the message. But Goring thinks back and he realizes, showing that this little girl was on here is the message to the people above. Whether maybe the people up there don't even know that she's here. Somehow this was maybe the top people in charge knew and no one else. But this is the true message, not the food. And his roommate Bahar is like, no, we have to protect the food. We have to send the message. And Goring convinces him, no, we have to feed it to the girl so she can live.
And what a concept too, because I didn't think about it until you just mentioned it. But as she's rising up, hopefully the other people in the pit would be able to see her and be like, oh, wow, the whole time I was eating way too much. There was a child suffering because of my selfish actions.
And children are what? They're the purest form of us, right? They're innocents. They're the ones that haven't really committed crimes or had the opportunity to live their lives. So I think that could put into perspective for everybody, whether it's the chefs at the top or the people in each level, seeing this child and realizing, wow, like there's so much more here than we realized.
Now, in your opinion, do you think that her message is going to change anything?
Oh, that's a hard one. I don't know. I don't even know if it necessarily has to be a huge change. I think the fact that they were able to see this will make everyone's, it could be an individual level, like I've heard when you protest, when you go out into the streets and you riot even, sometimes it doesn't really get the message across because, people, they don't want to respond to that. But by
they're concentrating on how you're doing it rather than what you're saying. Yes, but
individual conversations and talking to people and getting the message to them and changing their mind frame, whether it's just you and someone and then they do it to the next person. That's, I think, the important way that we can change the world, by educating the people around us and them spreading the message to someone else.
I think for the viewer, we're supposed to get the message, and it's supposed to mean that, listen, the system only works if we take care of each other. We have to change the system fundamentally.
Exactly.
As for the people in the story who control the pit or the hole, I don't think that they're going to get it. They're going to be like, oh, well, if we're seeing this as an allegory for capitalism, they're going to see this girl and be like, oh, well, if somebody from the worst level could rise all the way to the top, then the system works.
Yeah, but you have to understand, right? The people at the top are only so powerful, right? They control everyone below them. Think about our system here, right? That, like the Koch brothers or, the people that run our government, they're only as powerful as long as they can keep people in line. I think, for example, Goring's roommate, the woman who worked for them, she didn't believe that a child could be there. You know, she was literally working for them, sending people here, and she didn't know this was happening. So if the people at the top that are still workers, you know, when that platform gets to the top, I don't think it's the people in charge. It's the chefs. The people, yes, exactly. They may say, whoa, you know, like, this is not okay. This is where we draw the line. And if everybody draws the line, those people at top will lose their power.
That is interesting. That's a little more hopeful than the way I was looking at it. Now, I also read into this as recognizing when it's time to let the next generation take over, because we see at the very end, the platform descends below the last level, and it's kind of like just a huge blank empty space, and Goring wants to ride all the way back to the top with this little girl. And Trimagasi, who has been living in Goring's head as a hallucination, he takes him off and he's like, you're not the message.
You'll dilute the message, right? Like you'll destroy it. They need to just see this child.
We'll see that not just in this movie, but even in a more extreme way next week when we cover Snowpiercer, the movie, not to be confused with the TV series, which is going to be coming out, which should be awesome. But there is a similar theme of like, you have to make sacrifices. Even if you're not going to be the one to benefit from a better system, the next generation will be the ones to. And that's why you should do it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's a great explanation of the end of this film.
Now, do you think that people are just naturally wired to not care about others, or do you think they are wired to have empathy? Because both this movie and Snowpiercer next week, they share that same theme of people being fine with their station in life, even if other people are suffering. And they just go, oh, like, somebody else will take care of it. Somebody will donate to them, social services, blah, blah, blah.
I think people are wired for self-preservation, you know, and it's not necessarily that you don't have empathy, but I think there's an ignorance. You know, the less you know, the less you think about it, the less you care. Or the less you know, you worry about it. You know, there's so many examples of this. You know, we talked earlier about knowledge being so powerful for people. You know, I would relate it to veganism for me. You know, it's like not really thinking about animal suffering always allowed me to keep eating meat. And then once I really made the connection, you know, it's hard to go back and do it. And I think people just, you know, as long as they're content, they say to themselves, everyone's going to be okay. I mean, look at Parasite we reviewed last week. When they got the driver fired, they said, I'm sure he found another job. He found a better job. You know, you convince yourself that everyone's going to be okay. But at the end of the day, you're really worried about yourself because that's self-preservation, right? You got to survive.
It is a shame. If every person thinks that way, then an individual human might survive, but humanity will not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why so many people are against socialism. They feel like they're going to lose what they have, and they're not worried about other people getting the same thing, which is, you know, a real shame. It's just a shame that we can't come together for that.
But it's not a shame that we watched this film. I definitely enjoyed it. This film managed to secure a Netflix deal by winning the People's Choice Award for Midnight Madness at the 2019 Toronto International Film Festival. So we see another international indie flick, just like Parasite, making its way, not necessarily to the top like Parasite did with Best Picture, but, you know, making its way into the mainstream because there are people who have messages to send out and they're willing to create in this time and get that message out.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, it's a cool sci-fi film. You know, it's a good film. I think it's interesting and, you know, there's a lot to pick apart. It's available on Netflix, so it's really easy to watch. You know, you don't have to pay anything if you have a Netflix account. I think everyone should give it a try. It's a short film. I think it's like an hour and a half maybe. So there's really no reason to give it a try. Absolutely.
And aside from the message that we got from this film, the director actually said in an interview that his message, moreover, was that humanity will have to move towards the fair distribution of wealth, with an exploration of the importance of individual initiative in driving political change that critiques both capitalism and socialist systems.
I think so. I think, you know, he's saying these systems are not perfect. You know, but we need to figure out, you know, how do we give everyone the resources they need? And if we just keep accepting what we have, we can never do that.
Absolutely. And it was so nice to see that Goring ended up becoming the hero of his own story. I'm not even sure he had the book with him at the end because he kind of became his own Don Quixote. Now, that being said, I never read the book. I don't know if he ends up like becoming a big hero of his own story at the end, but Goring definitely
Yeah,
does.
he does. You know, he sacrifices himself. He's probably going to die down on that basement floor, but and he only had a month left to get out. He was going to get out and get what he wanted, and he, you know, for whatever reason, he chose to sacrifice himself to change the system.
And that's the important thing. Not on your way out, like you mentioned John McCain. Don't wait until you're on your way out to make the changes that should have been made years ago.
Yeah, he has his whole life ahead of him, and he still decides to do the right thing.
And I think that's just something that we're all going to have to decide too. You know, do we make that decision? And you know, I've been wrestling a lot too. Like, oh, if a revolution did happen, like, you know, people always lose their lives. Would you be one of the people who's willing to lose your life in that situation?
It's a hard decision,
you know,
man. You know, if you have those kind of viewpoints, you kind of put a target on your back. You know, the government watches you, and you know, you can really shake things up for people. And you know, it's hard. It's hard to say I'm going to put my life on hold to make these changes.
It really is, because you know, even, you know, us down here, we have so much to lose. You take a couple days off of work to go and protest, even. You know, that's a couple of days of work.
Yeah, you get arrested. You know, you gotta pay to get out. You know, you could lose your job. There's so many repercussions.
There really are. You know, best thing that anybody can do is just make sure they're as educated as possible before making their decisions. Make sure that you know as much as you can about the system.
Yeah, make sure you understand, you're comprehending, you're doing critical thinking. If you're voting for a candidate, make sure that you understand their policies, not just who they are, you know, who they appear to be on a stage. Like, really do your research and make sure that their record holds up, you know, that they're not just telling you something to get elected or get voted in, and that they really believe in the message that they're giving you. Because at the end of the day, it's your life, not really theirs, you know, that is in their hand. They're going to be fine one way or another, but you might not be.
Those are very wise words, and I'm just going to leave off on those. I think those are great. Ty, thank you so much for coming back for another episode of the Politipop podcast. It's always great having you on.
Yeah, I was glad to be here. Thank you.
Next week, we're going to be reviewing Snowpiercer, which will be our second Bong Joon-ho movie. You can find that on Netflix as well, or you know, try and find it on whatever other streaming platforms you can. And they are making a TV series out of it too. So now's definitely the time to rewatch Snowpiercer. It's a really great movie. Chris Evans is in it as one of the leads. You know, so if you want to see Captain America topple the class system.
It's also a comic book, so check out the comic book too.
Ooh, absolutely. That's great. Support art and create art.
It's getting us through this quarantine, right?
It absolutely is. Other people's creations. So speaking of other people's creations, we're going to ride out on another song this time, and I think it's very appropriate and fitting to the theme of this film. It's called Rise, and it is a song by the Flowbots. It's from their albums called Fight with Tools. It's very applicable to this movie and to where we stand in our lives now on a social level and a political level as well. That being said, listeners, no matter what you watch, no matter what you're reading, no matter what kind of information or media you're taking in, keep learning, keep thinking, read between the lines, and we'll see you next week.
Till then.
and she gets Goreng, and I think she like stabs him a couple of times.
She stabs Termagasi.
Yeah, sorry. What did I say?
Goreng.
All right.
She saves Goreng.
Sorry, do you want to play D&D at 4 or 6?
I don't care.
Fuck. Because I figure if it's at 4, I'm only gonna have like an hour and a half until
I'm letting the burp out.
But then like later on in the night.
Excuse me.
Let me text.
So you want to do 5?
Do you think we can?
Yeah, why not?
All right. Let me just.
He wrote Mr. Booch pretty interesting.
I don't know what the fuck, Mr. Bouch. Hi, it's me, Mr. Bouch.
Bernie just endorsed Biden.
Get the fuck out of here. Just going into the outtakes. It's not your fault. Fuck this world. We'll put that in the outtakes too. They is it racist that I don't know the roommate's name?
No, because we didn't know the lady's name either.
Fuck. What's this movie called? The Platform.
Was it Baharat? There's no picture of him.
My MDB is being a dickhole right now. Baharat. Okay. All right. Ready?